We're going to talk about wolves today because I think it is very important for Americans, or really anyone, to see how vital one species can be for an entire ecosystem and how the removal of such species can destroy an ecosystem. And also because wolves are constantly under attack in America, from hunters, from legislation, and so on. But they are absolutely vital to ecosystems. And the reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone proves that. So let's talk about it. In the mid-1990s, an extraordinary ecological experiment began in the heart of the American West. After 7 decades of absence, the gray wolf was reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park. Now, the reintroduction of the gray wolf to Yellowstone set off one of the most profound and observable examples of ecosystem restoration ever documented, and it is a phenomenon scientists call a, quote, trophic cascade. It is also an extremely profound example of how each animal and species or whatever holds a niche and how important those niches are, even if you don't know it. For generations, Yellowstone has basically existed in a state of imbalance, right? And with wolves, which were eradicated around the 1920s, their primary prey, elk, right, existed virtually unchecked. And though elk were still hunted by bears and cougars, the absence of their most persistent predator removed a critical evolutionary pressure. Elk populations soared exponentially, pushing the limits of the park's carrying capacity. And more consequently, their behavior changed. Without the threat of wolves, elk became sedentary, particularly in the winter. They congregated in valleys and along riverbanks, browsing relentlessly on tender young shoots of willow, aspen, and cottonwood. This intensive grazing held the landscape in kind of like a suspended state, right? These crucial plants were kept stunted, unable to grow into the mature trees and shrubs that once defined Yellowstone's waterways. And then they introduced the wolves back into the environment, right? The reintroduction of wolves in 1995 and 1996 was the catalyst for a sweeping transformation across Yellowstone. And the change didn't just begin because of the predation of wolves on elk, right? Their mere presence caused the change, right? The ecology of fear returned to elk specifically, but probably other animals too. Elk no longer could graze leisurely in open meadows, right? So they became more vigilant again, they kept moving, and they sought refuge in thicker timber. This behavioral shift was the first crucial domino to fall that transitioned Yellowstone to being better, more lively again. Perhaps even more than the actual number of elk unalived by wolves. With elk browsing reduced, the willows and aspens began a remarkable recovery. Almost miraculously, these plants, which had been nibbed at for decades by elk, right, started to grow tall and robust. This was now the second domino to fall, right? The resurgence of riparian forests in Yellowstone. And the third domino that transitioned Yellowstone back is a beaver. Beavers! Beavers are ecosystem engineers, and they require a reliable food source, specifically mature willows and aspens, to survive winter. So for most of the 20th century, with willows stunted, Yellowstone's beaver population had collapsed to a single struggling colony. If you don't know, beavers are really important. The returning wolves, by altering elk behavior and allowing willows to flourish, inadvertently set the table for the beavers to come back. As beaver colonies multiplied from 1 to over a dozen, they began their work as their landscape architecturists. Beavers' dams slowed flowing of streams, creating a series of ponds and wetlands. These ponds reduced erosion, raised the water table, provided cold, shaded habitat for fish and amphibians, and created new meadows. The land itself began to store more water. And the wolves' return rippled through the entire food web, right? Wolves' kills provided a steady year-round source of carrion, which is like, without getting too gross, dead animals, right? It's a crucial food source for scavengers. So before the reintroduction of these wolves, elk primarily died in winter die-offs, quote-unquote die-offs, creating a boom and bust cycle for scavenger food. Now these wolf-killed elk, provided a more reliable food source for a vast suite of species. Ravens, eagles, magpies, coyotes, foxes, and even massive grizzly bears emerging from hibernation all benefited from this. And scientists have even documented ravens literally following wolf packs. By the way, something that you can find in Native American stories, knowing the wolves could provide their next meal. And it continues, even the physical geography of the park changed. The recovering vegetation stabilized riverbanks, reducing erosion and causing streams to meander less and carve fewer channels. The very paths or courses or whatever of rivers became more fixed and healthy. The story of the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone is it's a showcase of a profound interconnection of how species hold such niches that ripple across multiple forms of animals, species, whatever ecosystem. It's a story of how the return of a single keystone predator can rewild the landscape from the top down. The story of Yellowstone teaches us that ecosystems are not merely collections of species, but intricate tapestries of relationships, right? When a vital thread is cut, the whole fabric can unravel, which is what was happening in Yellowstone, right, and various other places. And when that thread is carefully rewoven, the picture of a healthy landscape can return and restore itself. Now, obviously, the problems with Yellowstone or any environment are not the wolves alone, right? Drought, fire, and other factors played a role, but their return provided the essential leverage, demonstrating that sometimes to heal a land, you literally must restore the very thing that once inspired fear. Sometimes the thing you're afraid of is literally the thing keeping ecosystems in balance. That is how it works. The wolves are a really astonishing story in Yellowstone, and it's really important that you know about it because it's important how we understand how species hold niches in societies and are completely and utterly keystone in various ways to ecosystems, as well as the fact that wolves are once again under threat in the United States with the rollback, I can't remember, I think it's a gray wolf maybe, of trying to take away endangered species protections, of trying to remove them from ecosystems itself, and so on in various places around the United States. Woman for Wolves on Instagram talks about this a lot. Women like me for wolves. Just so worth a follow. And in and of itself, this is what land back also looks like. It is the indigenous, first of all, primarily love restoring ecosystems because they are land stewards, right? And we colonizers destroy them. So when they get land back, they restore it by reintroducing native species like elk in California recently got reintroduced. I made a video about that. But also land back does mean to animals too. They have to have habitats, guys. And even the ones that may threaten you are important. And I want to remind you through the various systems that we have right now, only 5% of mammals on the planet are wild. We've really screwed it. For comparison, in like the mid-1800s, it was like over 50% the mammals were wild. Anyways, this is a really long video. I did want to talk about wolves because I do love wolves, but I also think it's really important we understand how even the predatory species that we may be afraid of are deeply, deeply important to ecosystems, and why land back is so important in a variety of ways. But I also wanted to show you what it looks like so you don't have to imagine it, what these kind of reintroductions look like, what happens, and things like that. If you've made it this far, give me a wolf emoji so I know you're one of the heroes that made it to the end.